So, Below Zero is another Allie Hazelwood short story. She's calling these the Steminist novellas. And as I said in September, I listened to the first one, Under One Roof. And then this month I listened to the final two, which the second one is actually Stuck With You. And then Below Zero is going to be the third one. However, my library had Below Zero done first. Honestly, they don't really need to be read in order. They're just about three best friends. And yeah, so Below Zero is about Hannah. And she works for NASA. And she's going to work on a rover. And so to test this, she goes into Norway and into the Arctic area there. And in this, she winds up stuck in a blizzard because she has tried to retrieve the rover and the blizzard got too bad. And so her love interest comes to rescue her. And he is actually Mara from the first book. He is her cousin. And this one I thought was a little awkward at times. He is described as the Hot Weasley brother, which I just find kind of an odd description, to be honest. And then some of the spice was just a little awkward as well. A lot of their conversation revolves around Mars and describing her as Mars, which I get it to a certain extent, but I just thought it was kind of weird. So I wound up giving this book 2 stars. It just definitely wasn't my favorite of the 3 novellas at all. Stuck With You is the final Steminist novella, and the final one that I listened to. This follows the third of the best friends, that is Sadie. She is an engineer, and she basically focuses on sustainability and eco-friendliness. In this one, she winds up stuck in an elevator with the love interest, Liam. And it actually starts out about 3 weeks prior. They met and had an instant connection, had a one-night stand, and then come to find out that he supposedly stole her pitch for his company in order to get some engineering for another client. And so this is basically just a whole big misunderstanding, and it was completely unnecessary for it to be this big of a thing, because Sadie could have spoken to Liam and she would have quickly found out that he did not intentionally steal the client, and he actually did not even make the pitch. Now, there was some funny parts there with Sadie's pet guinea pig, and this was, I believe, the shortest of the 3 novellas. This one I just felt like was a little fast-paced. I definitely enjoyed Under One Roof the most. I listened to the memoir When Breath Becomes Air, which is by Paul Calistini. I'm sure I butchered his last name. But he was basically a neurosurgical student, and he did this because he wanted to learn about life and death and basically the morals that go along with it. And this story is his journey on doing that, as well as dealing with a very aggressive cancer that he has. This was a very affecting book as I'm sure you would expect it to be, being it's a memoir, of a terminal cancer patient for just over half. The first half kind of tells about his childhood, and not really childhood, but young adulthood, and graduating high school, going to college, thinking he's going to be a literature major, and then realizing that the self is in the brain, but if you damage the brain, you can change the self, and basically just trying to make sense of this. It is like I said, a deeply affecting memoir. It's also a relatively short one, and the way it's written, just you can tell that he was a literary student. Does tend to be a very literary memoir, but I feel like it's also very accessible, and I feel like it's something that anybody could take something away from. House of Sky and Breath is book 2 of the Crescent City series by Sarah J. Maas. This was another one that I listened to as audiobook. I didn't enjoy this one as much as I enjoyed the first one in the series. One of the things that really annoyed me is it's obviously quite based off of Norse mythology. You have the Vanir, the Asteri, you have Midgard, and then this is the thing that got me, is obviously Thursday comes from Thor. It was originally known as Thor's Day. And so in the book, of course I'm not sure if it's written this way or if the narrator is mispronouncing it, but she doesn't pronounce it as Thor. It's Thur. He is the thunder god Thur. And I get that, yes, you don't have to keep everything exactly the same, artistic license. But I feel like when she has kept everything else, Midgard, Vanir, Asteri, even Hel. Hel is spelled with one L, because I was able to actually kind of flip through the first book, being as I have it in print, and I did see that. And then the way they pronounce it, it's cut off, so you can tell it's only supposed to have one L. And I'm sure there are others I'm just not remembering. But, to take, like, one of the most recognizable legends and just butcher their name like that, it really irked me. Now, I did like at least that one thing I've seen with Sarah J. Maas is that she tends to go on character assassination rampages, and she did not in this book. Hunt Athalar didn't become, as Bryce would put it, an alpha hole. At least not any more than he was. And for what he was, it was, simply trying to be common sense. I don't want you digging into this because you could get hurt. But when she continued to, he didn't try to stop her. He wasn't overly controlling, in my opinion. So, while it's not bad, it's not as good as the first book. And again, I do think this is one that I'm going to have to go back and actually read, because there tends to be a lot going on, and I know I'm not catching it all listening to it. But I'm catching, I want to say at least 90% of it, enough to follow it. But for some of the finer Minionate, I'm going to have to reread it. My Dear Starkist is a dark academia / mystery / ghost story that follows the main character, Finch, who is trying to get into Ululum Girls Academy, and this is basically a private high school for the arts. She is a piano prodigy and wants to go to college for that. So it opens with her coming in and doing a rehearsal for the principal, to see if they'll accept her. Afterwards, there's an accident, and then when she comes, she's the only one who survives. So then when she comes back in the new year, she meets up with Celine, who she did actually meet at her rehearsal briefly. And so there's some friction there originally. And then they become closer as they try to fight the spirit, Neurosi. And it kind of unfolds slowly that, Neurosi starts out seeming like she's actually meaning to help. She's not bad. And then things kind of just slowly amp up. And then eventually everything comes to a head and they have to fight Neurosi. And yes, this was a pretty good book. It had, the dark academia vibes. Ululum is a old school, so, it's creepy and everything. I thought all the characters were very well fleshed out. And, I did enjoy reading it. I did wish we would have gotten a little more about Neurosi. Because you find out certain little things, but they served more to just pique my interest about, okay, well, if this is her, what else is there? And that sort of thing. I'm going to be intentionally vague just because I don't want to give it away. But the last, probably about 10 chapters were really, really good, really, really fast-paced. And you find out a lot about Neurosi. And yeah, I thought this was a very well-written book. Nothing But Blackened Teeth is a horror novella set in a Heian era mansion in Japan. And it really wasn't that scary or creepy. The cover is honestly the creepiest thing about this book, and it follows a bunch of 20-somethings, two of whom this is basically their honeymoon / wedding, because the girl, Talia, has always wanted to be married in a haunted house, and so basically this group of friends came together to rent out this mansion that's supposedly haunted so she could be married there. And rather predictably, things go wrong, and that's basically the book. It's very short. It's something like 120 pages. None of the characters are particularly likable, which isn't necessarily a problem, but I didn't find them engaging either. I won't completely write this off. Like, it was one of those things I was kind of like, okay, I kind of want to know what's going to happen. Are they going to get any sort of redemption? What sort of things are they going to run into? And I won't say I regretted reading it. I am glad it was a short read. It only took me about an hour to read. If you're into Japanese ghost stories, if you're into the kind of meta 20-something stream of consciousness books that is much closer to what this is than horror. Again, I'm not saying it's bad, it's just not quite what I was expecting when I picked it up. But I do think a lot of people would like it, and I did enjoy it myself, though not as much as what I thought I would. Belladonna is a gothic mystery / romance, and I will say it's actually had a lot more romance than I was expecting. There was whole chapters that were just for the romance instead of it being sprinkled throughout. I did like the romance, I did like the development of it, and I enjoyed this book overall. It follows a girl named Signa, whose parents and the whole party that they were hosting to introduce her basically to everybody when she was about 2 months old. The whole entire party was poisoned. And since then, she's been bounced back and forth between guardians. She's now 19, just has to hold out for another year, then she'll inherit. So she's sent to live with her newest relatives, the Hawthorns, and they are her cousins and their children. And you find out that the mother has passed away, the daughter is sick, and as soon as she gets there, as soon as Signa gets there, she realizes that the daughter, Blythe, is being poisoned. Now, along with this, because she had this experience when she was younger, she can see spirits and she can see death, and she starts talking to death, and they eventually come to an understanding, and it's a very slow burn that they come to trust each other and eventually love each other. And then you do have some good quotes, like Death says, "I'm hated and feared more than anything or anyone in this world, so at times, yes, it can be sad, but it's who I am. There's good in it too. I'm the first person people see when they draw their last breath. I am many things, but what I am not is ashamed. Despite what you may think, my world isn't so dark at all." And so this is about halfway through the book when she's starting to trust him, because he's warned her that, Blythe doesn't have long to live unless you can figure something out. Because obviously him being Death, he knows when people will die, and so he can kind of help Signa by letting her know that, Blythe is close, you need to do something. And she's been trying, but hasn't been that successful yet, and so now that kind of gives her the spur forward to do more. And I really like the relationship between Blythe and Signa as well. They wind up being very, very close, basically almost like sisters. And at one point, Blythe gives her a mask, and she says, "You are valued, Signa. I care for you not because you're polite or skilled at social graces, but for all the oddities that make you who you are. I know society teaches us to be soft, dull, and compliant, but you're not to be any of those things. Do you understand? Do not change the parts of yourself that you like to make others comfortable. Do not try to mold yourself to fit standards someone else has set for us." This is set back in the 1850s, so, etiquette was a huge thing, and Signa has always wanted to be out in society to make a good match so that she doesn't have to rely on anybody, and Blythe is kind of the opposite. And so it's rather interesting to see them play off of each other. And yeah, this was a very good, like I said, gothic mystery romance. Just a little heavy on the romance. This Poison Heart was pretty interesting. It was kind of an intersection of The Secret Garden and Poison Ivy. And it follows Briarcis, I believe is how you say her name, Bree for short. And she inherits an old mansion, and along with this, she gets a bunch of letters and has to go on a little bit of a scavenger hunt. And she finds out some truths about her family. So basically you start out with, you find out she's adopted, and her adoptive moms own a flower arrangement business and a horticulture business, and she helps them out. and you find out through this that she can make plants grow, and she eventually finds out that she's immune to all poisons. And right about the time she finds this out, she finds out about her inheritance. And so the letters that go along with this, say that there's this hidden garden, here's a map, and she finds the garden and opens it. It's pretty normal to start with. Then she goes through this gate, and there's all these poisonous plants. And so basically, she's the only one who can go in there, because, if she touches them, nothing will happen. And she slowly finds out that this is something that's been passed down through her family. And there's a lot of Greek mythology in it as well. You have her aunt Ciceri, and Ciceri and Selene are her aunt and her mother. And then as you go back, you have more mythological names. You have Medea, and you have Phesperon's one. And so it's kind of a neat little intersection with everything. My main issue with the story is it took probably about 2/3 of the way in to really get, fully going, get into the real full meat of the story. But even before that, I thought the build-up was well done, and the characters were well built up. And it's a very interesting world to be in, and I definitely enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to reading book 2. This is October 30th, so I doubt I'll finish it before November 1st, but it will either be in this video later on, or you'll see it at the end of November. Killers of a Certain Age was just released this month, and it follows a set of 4 lady assassins who are basically women of a certain age. They're all around 60, and they're all getting ready to retire, and then come to find out that the place they work for actually wants them dead. This isn't really spoilers, you find this all out within the first about 5 chapters. But yeah, so I thought this was kind of a fun little thriller / action / spy book. And I did kind of enjoy how they use the fact that they are women and women of a certain age to kind of be overlooked and underestimated. Nobody thinks twice about a 60-year-old woman. Oh, what's she gonna do? Like, she's not gonna hurt anybody. But obviously all 4 of these are very lethal women. And one thing I did like about it too is, despite the fact that it deals with assassins, it's honestly really not all that bloody. There obviously, there is some blood and killing and gore. Just because they are assassins, it's going to happen. But it didn't feel gratuitous, and there really wasn't that much cursing. It was actually a relatively clean book for the subject matter, and I just thought it was kind of, like I said, a fun thriller book that focuses on a group that you really don't see portrayed much in fiction. So yes, I definitely enjoyed it and would recommend it if you enjoy any sort of thrillers. An American Princess is about a rather interesting woman that I had never heard of. Her name is Elena too. She was born in the late 1800s. She had 5 marriages, And basically she started out in this little New York town that was a very small town, and made a lot of herself. She married twice, and then the third time she married, she found her love. Then she was widowed. Then her fourth marriage is what made her a princess. She married a German prince in between World War I and World War II. And then when he turned out to be not a nice guy at all, he basically sided with the Nazis. She left him, and then she married a Russian count, and that was who she ended her life with. And reading through this, obviously she lived at a very interesting time, when things went from the very old-fashioned Victorian ideals. She lived through the Great Depression, the Gilded Age, both World Wars, and it was the 1950s when she died. And so obviously she saw a lot of life, and her philosophy was that everyone should be brought up, if not to work, at least knowing how to work, and that if you try, you can do whatever, and that if you've tried and just can't see your way out, ask for help. The only thing I don't necessarily agree with is she's like, you need to be married. That I don't necessarily agree with. But at the time she grew up, obviously that would be a thing. And she wound up helping the princess of the Netherlands get married. She got married to basically a son that Elena had unofficially adopted, and she went through life basically unofficially adopting many, many young men and women and helping them get a start, and many of them did very well. And she knew, obviously, a lot of people. She knew Winston Churchill. She knew Dwight Eisenhower, was quite good friends with him. She knew Jackie Kennedy before she was married. I do wish there was a little more about her interactions with these people. The book tended to be just more about the houses she bought, and it would briefly mention that she knew these people, but there were no real interactions with them other than it was mentioned she had tea with Winston Churchill and a granddaughter of his, but there was nothing about, their conversations, their interactions. Same with Jackie Kennedy and the future President Eisenhower. Most of it focused on her and her husband's, some of the interactions with her adoptive children. Some letters were referenced, and it did also kind of go into that she was philanthropic. I'm sorry, I cannot pronounce that word. She practiced philanthropy. I can pronounce that part of it. And would use her fortune to organize charity balls and such. And, like I said, she was just a very interesting person that I had actually never heard her name of before. And I would definitely be interested to learn some more about, her interactions with Winston Churchill, Eisenhower, and, other people. And it's just so interesting that she lived through the Gilded Age, saw the Great Depression, was able to hold on to most of her fortune through that, and yet was still able to help people, was still, by all accounts that I can find in this book, she was very kind. So yeah, she's definitely an interesting person, and I did enjoy reading about her. So I finished Gary Paulson's memoir, Gone to the Woods, A Story of a Lost Childhood. And I can definitely see where his inspiration for his survival stories came from. He obviously had a very rough childhood, from the time when, he would sing in bars with his mother to make money, to when his aunt took him and he lived on the farm with her and her husband, and that was hard in a physical way. You had to learn to hunt, to fish, to gather mushrooms, but he obviously very highly enjoyed this. Then when he goes back to his mother, he still escapes to the woods, and this has been, kind of an ongoing theme throughout his life. He also lived in the Philippines for a while, directly after World War II, and some of the things he saw there were obviously, very harrowing and something that a child shouldn't have to see. But he is able to write all this and bring you into it and make you feel the humanity without cheapening any of it, without making any of it too horrific. But yet to set it up as more than facts. And there was actually one very funny scene at the beginning when he's at the farm with his aunt and uncle, and he asks, "Why do you keep the geese? They're so mean." And so he has this epic battle with the geese with the help of the farm dog that they have. And I guess it's not really meant to be funny, but it kind of is in a way, to imagine this little 5-6-year-old boy and this large dog just battling these geese. And, I've been around geese from when I grew up. We had them in a botanical garden that I lived near. I knew how mean they can be, and especially when you get a whole herd of them, and I guess maybe that was part of it, as I just kind of found that nostalgia of it, that, I completely get where he's coming from, to be what made it funny. So I would say, if you like survival stories, if you like, memoirs, this would definitely be one to check out. The Legend of Lady Elena is I guess I would call it somewhere between a middle grade and a YA. Lady Elena is about 15. However, the writing and the descriptions are more geared towards, I would say, younger audience. And the action, it's very fast paced, and it is a shorter book. It's like 240 pages, but I did enjoy it. It's set in Scotland back in the year about 500, and there's definitely been some research done. The fact that they're talking about trenchers being a big slice of bread that they would put their food on. That is something that was done back then. And I thought it was a very interesting historical book. And one thing that did bug me a little bit is they used a lot of modern language. There was still a few, like they would use lad, lass, and I, but there were no, like, methinks, anything like that. Like I said, I did enjoy it, though, and it is something I could recommend if you like historic fantasy. Harry the Dirty Dog is a children's picture book, and this was, as I mentioned in my book haul video, something I had read when I was younger, and I picked it up from the library as a kind of nostalgia read. And I thought, again, it was very cute, something that I definitely enjoyed when I was younger. I still enjoy it now, and I think that's kind of very important with picture books, is that, those who would read them to children would also enjoy them because, as I'm sure all of you can remember, you had that book that you wanted read every single night. And if it's not written very well, your parents will get tired of it. Kind of like that scene in Despicable Me with the Three Little Kittens book when Gru makes his unicorn book because he is tired of the Three Little Kittens and it was accidentally maliciously destroyed. But yeah, so Harry the Dirty Dog is about Harry, a little dog who is white with black spots. He loves everything except baths. So he decides to hide the scrub brush and run away, and he gets as dirty as he possibly can until he becomes a black dog with white spots. So of course he looks nothing like Harry. And when he tries to go home, his family doesn't recognize him. And that is basically the crux of this book and the problem that has to be overcome. And the illustrations are a little old-fashioned. This was written in, I believe, the late 50s, early 60s. They're very simple line and I believe colored pencil drawings. But I thought, they really did bring the story to life. The faces are very emotive. And, the text is quite simple enough that the illustrations easily match it. And, like I said, it's just a cute little quick read. Then I read No Roses for Harry. And that one, Harry gets a green sweater with red roses from Grandma. He has to figure out how to get rid of this sweater. And he eventually does, and I thought it was cute how he got rid of it without really hurting Grandma's feelings. And, again, just another cute little nostalgia read. And then the third Harry book that I did not know this one existed, and that is Harry by the Sea, in which him and his family go to the beach, and in typical Harry fashion, the sun is very hot. He just wants to get some shade, but their umbrella is not big enough, and anywhere else he tries to go, he gets chased away from, and so he sits down by the sea and gets covered in seaweed, and in typical Harry fashion, chaos ensues until, again, a very simple solution, and he is found and brought back home. Again, another cute little one. I really did enjoy that as well, even though I never read it when I was younger. There is a fourth Harry book, but I could not find it, and that is Harry and the Lady Next Door. And in this one, apparently, the Lady Next Door sings horribly off-key, which drives Harry nuts, and so he somehow either gets her to stop singing or teaches her to sing better. I'm not sure exactly which. If I do find that, I'll definitely be reading it, because again, this is just a cute little kids series. Grand Blue Dreaming is a diving manga. It follows a man who has, young man who has just started college, and he goes to live near the sea in Japan, and it turns out that the uncle and cousins he's living with, they run a dive shop, and in addition to this dive shop sponsors a college diving club, and so it follows him getting to know all the members of the dive club, and there's some hijinks there, some college hijinks, some, let's get drunk and strip because we're drunk, because we're playing strip, rock, paper, scissors based on baseball. And then there are some semi-serious moments. It's mostly comedic relief. But there is one moment at which Iori, the main character, he says, I don't know how to swim. How can I dive? And another character says, if you never try something outside of your comfort zone, how will you know what you can truly do? So I did enjoy it somewhat. I rated it 2 stars because while it was somewhat funny, a lot of the humor was rather juvenile and just kind of like, okay, can we get on to an actual plot? But it wasn't bad, just not necessarily what I was expecting. Grand Blue Dreaming Volume 2 opens with Iori learning how to dive, and he actually goes out into the ocean a little bit. So that chapter is pretty cool to see him learning more about how to dive and getting excited about it, and seeing all the other guys be a little more serious. Then the rest of it is pretty much just college antics. Of course, there is the drinking again, and then they have the cultural festival in which there's a beauty pageant, and there's one for the men and one for the women. And they meet another freshman named Kohei in this volume. He's wound up in the diving club as well. They kind of trick him into it. He's a huge otaku for anime, and this is kind of just played off for laughs, as is an upperclassman woman who is bisexual. Again, the fact that she's a woman, the fact that she's bisexual is just kind of played off for jokes. And I did like, at one point they meet a freshman in the tennis club, and she is rather heavy on the makeup. People make fun of her, this upsets her, and so Iori and Kohei help get revenge on the leader of the tennis club, who was the ringleader of this. That part I did think was funny. The rest of it was kind of hit and miss. This is another series that I got through Humble Bundle. So I have the first 10. I'm not sure if I'll continue after then. But if they add more of the diving and tone down the hijinks, I think I'd like it a lot more. Hinoaga Crush is written by Takahiro. He is the same guy who wrote Akame ga Kill. And Hinoaga Crush follows a young girl named Hanoa and several of her friends, who are Hisame. You have Hisame, Tobari, Suzumaru, and Kumehache, and they are all young people. I would say probably about, late teens, maybe early 20s, and they are all known as troublemakers for various reasons. Hanoa has been orphaned, and she is very headstrong. She is a fisher, and the fishing collective refuses to pay her high prices, or really market prices, so she leaves them, and so they see her as very headstrong. Then you have Tabari, who is basically, a tomboy. She fights and, everything, so they kind of look down on her. Then you have Suzumaru, who is the son of a mistress, so of course then he's looked down on. Kumehache, his father is a drunk. And then you have Hisame. Hisame doesn't really seem to be a troublemaker. And really none of the others are too much. But yeah, so basically these 5 want to make a name for themselves in the civil war that's going on between all these nations. And during this, you have Akame from Akame ga Kill, she washes up and decides to help them. So this first volume basically sets up this civil war and gives you a little bit of the background, gives you some character work, and then it is Hinoa and her friends' turn to go into battle, and covers basically their training and then the beginning of their first battle. And I enjoyed Hinoaga Crush. I did enjoy this as well. Obviously, it's volume 1, so there's still a lot of setup, but I can tell, just like with Hinoaga Crush, there's going to be a lot of action, and it's well drawn and easy to follow action, and there are some pretty good character moments. And in fact, at one point, Hinoa Hinoa basically says that her and her friends say, if we can distinguish ourselves on the battlefield, even members of the lowest caste of society like us can obtain our dreams. And that just kind of sets the tone that all of them are very optimistic and wanting to eventually end this war while using it to better themselves. So yeah, if you like action manga, I can definitely recommend Hinoaga Crush. I started Webtoons this month, so I've read a few of them. I started with Everything is Fine, and I actually really, really liked this series. The whole first season is just kind of has this creeping wrongness, and the further you go into it, the more you can see that it's wrong. And then you don't really fully realize what it is that's wrong. You can just tell that, okay, why are they wearing these cat masks? What happened to this world? And then as you follow Sam and Maggie, the main couple, you realize that they're trying to protect someone, but who is this person to them? And eventually you find out that there's basically levels. This is level 1 that they're in this neighborhood. You have to basically be able to defeat all the other people and move on to the next area, and then go from there to eventually rescue this person. So I found this very interesting. The art is very understated color-wise, like it's all in pastels, but obviously this is a very dark story, and it's something that kind of draws you in and keeps you interested because you want to know what twists and turns are coming, and you do get to see the fallout that this is taking on Sam and Maggie through their conversations, and then when they can finally have a safe place, the difference in their conversations. Just the character work is great. The art is, again, like I said, the colors are great. The style is very simple and understated that allows the storytelling to really shine through. Another webtoon I read was Not Even Bones, and this was obviously a novel series that I read in about January of this year, and my friend gave it to me because she had read the webtoon, liked the webtoon, bought the books so that she could read the books as well. And so when she told me about webtoons, this is how she introduced me to it. So I did read that. The art style for season 1 I absolutely love. And the story, they kept it very, very close to the book. They may have changed a few small bits of dialogue, but the main ideas were still there. All the characters were still there. Major plot points were still there. So it was done really, really well. And again, you have all the moral grayness that you had in the books because, Nita's mother sells unnaturals. Nita doesn't kill them, her mother does, but she does dissect the bodies, package them for sale. Is she complicit or not? And then you have all sorts of different unnaturals that are mentioned, and it's just a very interesting world. And I did enjoy seeing these characters, actually getting to see them illustrated. And season 1 followed the first book. It was the whole entire first book. And I'm definitely excited to see how closely season 2 follows the second book. Not Even Bones, season 2 on Webtoons, follows the second book in the series, which is Only Ashes Remain. They did change artists in this season. I preferred the season 1 art, but this art for season 2, it wasn't bad, just different. And again, it follows the book very closely, and you do get to see lots more of Nita and Kovit interacting. You also see Nita's darkness coming out more, and you learn about some more unnaturals, as well as, get some more little tidbits about the world. This is a book series and webtoon series that I did really enjoy. If you like the urban fantasy, I guess it'd almost be realistic fantasy in a way. I think you would definitely like it. Yeah, the webtoons are a very quick read as well.